Well, hello everybody. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for joining and welcome. Glad everybody could make it and know there's some new people here today. I believe I saw that Anne-Marie sent out an invite to people, so it's glad to have those who could make it come and meet everybody new. I'm just here in sunny Michigan, which almost sounds like an oxymoron, but today it's sunny outside. Looking out my window, I see these beautiful blossoms on the tree, so I'm convinced that spring has finally come to Michigan, so that's a good thing. Anyway, I'm excited to share with you about this new Google Sync that we've been working on, and interested to hear where everybody's from and what feedback on this. So that brings me to the chat here, which is, I don't know how many of you have been on a YouTube webinar before or YouTube live stream, but the chat is visible to others while we're here, but not afterwards. So feel free to interrupt me anytime. There is a delay here of about 15 to 30 seconds or so, and so I may not respond right away, but I'll try to keep an eye on the chat. This video will be made public afterwards, but like I say, the chat messages will not. So anything you drop in the chat here is just private to our session as of now. But of course, if you ask a question, chances are I'll probably read it back, and so that in the future it'll make sense in the video. All right, so a little bit about who Userbus and I are. Userbus is a school data sync platform, basically. For me, I worked in a high school, and I've been integrating since 2014 when I kind of came up with this idea, and now serving schools across the U.S. with various syncs of different kinds. So, like I said, I live in Michigan, sunny Michigan as of today, and here I am. I picture the founder of Userbus, and I live here in Michigan with my wife, Crystal, and Skeeter, our dog. So, to jump right into it, why sync Blackbaud to Google? Well, you probably have your own reasons for wanting to do that if you joined the webinar, but there are some that I've identified just for those who are still thinking about it, deciding whether this is something you actually need. There are 4 reasons that I have thought of and seen schools when they adopt a sync like this. First one, of course, people are pulled in all directions when you're working in a school. I worked for 5 years in a high school. I know how that goes. And this is the kind of thing you don't want to spend too much time on, because there are things that require your creativity and higher order thinking than getting users into Google and keeping them up to date. So that's one thing. Another is the speed that you can do something like this at. And this is more in terms of just, how fast you can get somebody into Google when they're changed in Blackbaud or created in Blackbaud. And if it's somebody's plate to do manually, it may take longer than just having a sync do it. There's also consistency. So, somebody, you might want to have always the same format of somebody's title. Like, does doctor have a dot after it in our way of doing it? Do we spell it out? Things like that you want to keep consistent between systems, as well as just somebody maybe making errors if they type it into Google by hand, and you want to minimize those. Also, priority. So this is just, you have, like we say, so many things on your plate already that how high of a priority does it get to update Google? And maybe Google sometimes will fall out of date if it's not updated. Okay, so those are a few of the reasons you might want to adopt a sync. But let's think now about what a sync could do if you're designing your ideal Blackbaud Google sync from scratch. And like I said, feel free to interrupt me at any time if there's an idea that you have that I'm not covering here. But these are some ideas about it. So let's say we're designing it from scratch. We got our ideal sync Blackbaud to Google. Well, here's some assumptions. First of all, we'll assume that you have users in Blackbaud. Okay, you're using Blackbaud as intended. You're putting people into Blackbaud, students and staff and the rest. And those are people who have signed up, or they are added by a registrar or somewhere in your admissions process, right? They're getting into Blackbaud. So Blackbaud is your system of record. It's your source of truth for your other systems. It's where it's most up to date. And probably by and large, we want Google to mirror that. So we want to create users in Google when they are created in Blackbaud, or they don't exist in Google. And you may have, independent users in Google that are not dependent on who's in Blackbaud. Maybe you have some accounts in Google that you just want totally separate from Blackbaud, and that's fine. But probably by and large, you do want it to somewhat mirror Blackbaud. Okay, so another thing we might want to do is we have a user in Blackbaud, and you have already a user in Google that represents that user, right? If you've been using Google for some time, then you're probably not starting from a clean slate. You've already got a John Smith in Google who represents a John Smith in Blackbaud. Maybe that's from another sync that you've used to connect these two, or maybe you've created them all manually in Google. So we want to be able to say, if we had our ideal sync, we would want to say, hey, these two represent the same person. And it can get complicated. Maybe you're just matching by email, but maybe not everybody's email is up to date, so you want to think about how to handle that matching. But there should be some kind of matching, hopefully, in our ideal sync. And so that this will avoid creating a duplicate account for that user in Google. All right, another thing we might want to do is, let's say that somebody's last name changes in Blackbaud or any other info about them. We'll want to update that in their Google user too. And let's say that somebody disappears from Blackbaud, maybe they graduate. We want them to maybe disappear from Google. Maybe we just want to suspend them in Google, but there needs to be some type of cleanup that our sync can do as well. We basically covered the whole account life cycle with those things. Okay, and like I say, if any questions so far, thoughts, just jump in anytime. All right, so what could a sync do here? Some more things. Maybe we want it to set passwords for users when they're created in Google. We might also want it to manage group memberships and manage what organizational unit in Google the user is placed into when they're created. And also, here's kind of an interesting idea. What if it could generate email addresses for them in Blackbaud, right? Let's say you have a new user, Johnny Smith, in Blackbaud. His email address is blank. Now, you have probably certain rules for how you want email address format to go. What if our sync could generate that in Blackbaud and then use that to create a user in Google too? Could be kind of cool. And then we want our sync to be customizable, because these things like email address format and all this, every school is probably going to have different rules about it. Okay, so let's look at what was already out there that could do something like this, some type of Google sync. Well, we have a few different options. Google themselves do have Google Cloud Directory Sync that can sync from Active Directory to Google. So if you're a Blackbaud school who already has some sync set up between Active Directory and Blackbaud, that could be an option. Clever and ClassLink have IDM type solutions that can sync to Google. And Student Provisioning Services is another vendor that I've talked to that has something a bit like this. And I would encourage you to check them out. I'm a big fan of decision matrices, so dump everything into a decision matrix and see what comes out on top for you. But for these, when we looked at the existing solutions, there were some problems with Blackbaud where they didn't work the best with Blackbaud. And okay, I see a question from Donna. Sorry, Donna, if I didn't address this earlier. The OUs would be based on things like probably department in Blackbaud, or it could be based on role. It could be really based on anything, and schools will do this differently. But the idea is you would want a sync that can take some rules and say, here's the OU that I'm going to place this user in Google based on those rules. And a rule might be if the user has the non-teaching staff role in Blackbaud, then I want you to put them in a staff OU in Google, if that makes sense. Does that answer that question? And I'll blaze ahead because of the delay. But if you have any other question on that, let me know in the chat there. I'm trying to keep an eye on that. So, all right. So the challenges with these existing vendors. One of the challenges is one-size-fits-all data. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So with the existing vendors, they tend to use OneRoster to pull Blackbaud data. And that gives a good foundation, right? Blackbaud's OneRoster can export students, teachers, classes, and enrollments. So that's a good start, but there are other things that you might want to put into Google too. And that's where these one-size-fits-all solutions start to fall a little bit short. So for example, non-teaching staff. This is just a big one for anything that pulls from OneRoster. Often you'll need staff, and the staff just are not included in the OneRoster exports from Blackbaud. So some of these systems that'll depend on OneRoster, like a Clever or a ClassLink, you're going to have to do something out of the box that's not just out of the box to set up staff sync. Same with athletic groups. They're not in OneRoster exports from Blackbaud. The same with community groups. And there's other data too, and other types of data that's just not going to be in this one-size-fits-all thing. Okay, so in some other challenges, another challenge number 2, adjusting your sync plans. And I'll give some examples on that. So let's say that Johnny Smith comes into your office and he says, he needs an account in Google right now. He's been added to Blackbaud, but the Google sync won't run for, however long it's on a schedule, let's say, and he wants one like this minute to log in. And so with most of these vendors, you can run a sync on demand, which is good. You'd go in there, you get a button like run my Google sync, something like that, and you can click run to run it even before it's scheduled. So you're going to do that for Johnny Smith, and the platform will usually give you something like a sync preview, right? And let's say that here's your preview on that day. Jane Doe has an account in Blackbaud but doesn't have one in Google, so the sync is going to create an account for Jane Doe in Google. Johnny Smith, again, the student who's just come before you, he has his account in Blackbaud but not in Google yet, so it's going to create one for him. It's also going to remove Lucas O'Shaughnessy from grade 11 students. And this is what, let's say that you don't want this. Maybe Lucas, yeah, he did leave grade 11. He's now in grade 12. But you still want him to be in that grade 11 students group in Google. And let's say, this is an exception to the rule. Let's say Lucas is like a tutor and he needs access to grade 11 stuff for some reason. I don't know. You can think of an example that would fit your school. This is just an example, but it illustrates the problem. Maybe you don't want all or nothing here. You want the sync to do some of these things, but maybe there's sometimes you don't want it to do all the things. Well, what you could do is have, like, if you had an ideal sync, is to have you'd be able to check which ones you want to do and which ones you don't want to do, and then run that sync through and have the system take care of it. Now, obviously, on an automated sync, you're not going to have that option, right? If it runs at 1 a.m. in the night, it's just going to do what it was going to do. But if you run it manually and you can say, okay, this action should not be taken, then in the future the automated sync won't take that action either. That would be kind of cool, right? You could basically say, I don't want this sync action to ever be taken, and then you could uncheck it and it would just not take that action. So that's something that some schools have been interested in because it's typically an all or nothing. If you're, the vendor will say, define the perfect rules for your sync, and exactly what you want to happen will happen. It's like, well, sometimes there's going to be an exception to the rule that you may want to handle ad hoc, and it's just kind of nice to be able to have the option to check and uncheck and not have to go into Google and adjust it after the sync runs to get it to what you want. Hope that makes sense. Our third challenge here with other vendors, limited customization. And an example of that would be, let's say that you want something to happen in the process of syncing that they don't support out of the box. Let's say a student's email changes and you want to get a notification email to IT or to a registrar or something when that happens. That's something that, it could be nice to be able to insert that somewhere into the sync process. But vendors may not support that. They may have a set of, you can log into their website and you can do some clicking and typing to customize it in certain ways, but there may be limits to those ways. Okay, so that was just, as we looked at the landscape and said what's out there now, those were some of the challenges that we saw with what's out there. So then we took the the Userbus approach to coming up with a sync from Blackbaud to Google. And this is the new approach that we're looking at today. So this started with a philosophy of how this sync should work. And it starts basically with Blackbaud data for Blackbaud schools. And this goes back to what we were talking about, these one-size-fits-all syncs, where they're starting with, one roster. They're starting with one-size-fits-all data. And we saw some of the problems with that. You can't get everything that you want easily, like staff and community groups and the rest. And so we're starting with, specifically, it's pulling from Blackbaud data sources for schools. And then adding to that boundless customization, which means we do support these things where if you need to insert something into the sync process, like hey, I need to send an email notification when such and such happens, then we can insert those. Even if they aren't in the web app, you would contact us. We can make those tweaks to it. And then adding to that speed and consistency, so that it's syncing quickly, and your destination Google will be kept up to date, and it's always up to date based on your Blackbaud data. Okay, so that was the philosophy that we started with, and then we took that and came up with this, which is a web portal where you can manage syncs. And you can see here on the top we have our Google Workspace sync. So the idea here is you can see when it last ran, what the status is, and then you can click on that and drill down. So let's look at here we're drilling down into the sync to remind. Some of you may be familiar with remind for messaging communication. Excuse me. The sync log here is what you can drill down into and see all the actions that it's taken, and also you can see a sync output, which is the individual actions that it would take on accounts. So here, and it's showing the actions that it would take for creating and updating some accounts in Active Directory. And so this would be that detailed view. And you can see here, what we were talking about earlier, can you pick and choose which options you want the plan to run? That's a work in progress still, so that's coming soon. But that's going to be the ideas with this. You'll be able to pick and choose, okay, yes, I do want to create, but I don't want to set this attribute value. And so you have a highly granular level of control over what you would do with this. All right, and so, then you can get a notification email. You can also go into the website itself to be able to view this, but you can see, hey, I created a bunch of people in Google. I updated all these accounts, and you can see all the details of that. So that's pretty cool. And then once you got that, then you log into your Google and you check, hey, there's my 448 users. They are, then you can breathe a sigh of relief. They're all being managed by my sync. And that's when the time comes to take, you and the team can go out to the tropical beach. Well, not in Michigan. I have to say our Michigan beaches don't look like this, so I can't do that, but maybe some of you can. But anyway, okay, so I see a question from Marcia. Where are we pulling the passwords from? Passwords are generated, so there's going to be some rules that you'd come up with, and we do this. Typically, it's different for every school, but some schools will have something like, a noun plus the user's ID or the current year, something like that. And so that's a pattern that we can set in the sync, and then that gets pushed to Google and it creates a user in Google. So yeah, it doesn't actually, it doesn't pull, like if the user has a Blackbaud password, it doesn't pull from Blackbaud. I don't think that's possible as far as I know. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can use it the other way, which is to have Google be your sign-on for Blackbaud, a single sign-on for Blackbaud, if I'm remembering right. But anyway, yeah, because the idea is, since Google is the identity management, usually that's where we set the passwords. Yep. Yeah, okay, so if you have any other questions, by the way, I will solicit questions in earnest now, because we're almost to the end here. I have a couple more things to share, but because of the delay, if you start dropping questions into the chat by the time I get there, we will probably... Oh, thanks, Kyle. Okay, so yeah, I guess the IDM question, yes, Google, I assume that's what you're responding to. Google can be used as the IDM for Blackbaud, which is pretty cool. Yeah, by the time we get back to questions, the chat messages will probably just be appearing, so because of that delay. But the thing I was going to share before that is where are we with this is early access, meaning we're working with a few schools on this, and if you're interested, you can request access. There's a link in the description to a sign up form, and we're basically looking in that form for like what your school needs at a high level, and we can customize the sync to those needs. So that's kind of a starting point of us figuring out, okay, what would this entail and how could we get you started with that? And that link is also here on the screen at userbus.xyz/Google Sync. Yeah, and what I want to offer, to those who are here, because you would be the early access people if you're interested in signing up for this and trying it out, is if you do like it and you can stick with it, and we can do like a 30 days of you just trying it as well. But if you are interested and want to go ahead with it, if you do sign up and submit that form, we can do a 15% off the first year, kind of an early access discount there for people who are interested in getting started with this right away. So, okay, so that is it as far as kind of the angle that this is being approached from and what's new out there. But any questions, anybody interested in how this could, you may have a certain challenge for your school that's happened with Google and you want to see if there's a way to smooth that out, or any thoughts about what you would want to see out of this kind of sync that maybe we haven't covered in the presentation so far. Or if you just want to share where you're from and what the weather's like where you are today. Like I said, it's beautiful outside, so I might take a walk in a bit here. Okay, how does the pricing model work? The pricing model, so it's a per user per year, and we consider users to be we have a formula that we basically pull the Blackbaud data and then tabulate the users, and it's the base platform starts at $1 per user per year, and there's a minimum kind of user count of 1099 users. And so that's, it's fine, obviously, if you have fewer users than that. But as far as the pricing, it starts at 1099 users per year at that price. And then, another question. Does this tool do any Blackbaud to Blackbaud syncing? For example, K12 to RENXT? Yeah, that's one that we're working on right now, because we've gotten a lot of interest in like an alternative to Connect Razor's Edge. And some of these things I think that we talked about earlier, some schools have expressed interest in wanting to see in that type of sync. And one was, if my understanding is correct, that Connect Razor's Edge is one of those all or nothing syncs, where if you use it to sync your K12 or ENXT data, then you're not able to pick and choose, like, okay, yeah, some of this is right, I want to sync this, but some of this, no, I don't want to do that. And so stuff like that is where we're trying to come in and solve some of that too. Yeah. So that's in the works. It's planned. There's not a RENXT sync yet out there today, but yeah, if you're interested in that, definitely shoot me an email. I'll have my contact info up here. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss another question? Oh, I did miss it. Yeah. Could your tool sync emails from parent records to Google Groups lists based upon a BB custom field like classroom or section? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because we are syncing. We do sync parent records now. We could definitely send that to a Google Groups list. I should say that's an optional thing, but we've definitely synced parent records. And yeah, the BB custom field is no problem. So yeah, that's one of the customizations we could do there. Okay, and I see, can you sync email addresses from parent records to Google Groups? External emails that are not in our domain base. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks for that. Sorry I missed that the first time around. Yep. Cool. Well, I will say, if you have any other questions too, I know we have a few minutes left, but I will say, check out some of our other syncs too. I know RENXT came up. We do sync to some other systems too. If you have any interest, if the Google Sync is not it right now for you, but we have a bunch and can do custom, and we sync to custom SFTP and other destinations too. But yeah, if you're interested, I encourage you just there's obviously no obligation. If you do want to check it out and sign up through that link, you could just tell us, here's my needs, and then we can get back to you. And so it's not like you're obligated at that point. But okay, Anne Marie, I see your question. Can you use it to clean up data? And that's something we can do with customization. Out of the box, it's more about setting up rules out of the box for how you'd want to maybe transform it to go to Google. But yes, cleanup is something too that's kind of come up in the Razor's Edge conversations, that schools are looking for something that goes back to Blackbaud and changes the Blackbaud data. So that's definitely something that's on our radar. And if your school has a need for cleaning up Blackbaud data, definitely reach out to me, because that's something we can put in the pipeline. It's like I say, it's not out of the box in the Google Sync, but it definitely can be done. Do you have a recommendation for the order in which to do a BBAD and Google Sync in? So I would say it depends on, if you use an AD and Google Sync through a platform like us, we don't make them dependent on each other. So I don't think I would have a preference or a recommendation. If you use a product like Google Cloud Directory Sync, so for example, let's say you use us to sync to Active Directory, and then you use Google Cloud Directory Sync to sync from Active Directory to Google. Then that's gonna necessitate putting the Active Directory sync first. But yeah, we don't do that. We treat them as separate, which I think is a good thing for a lot of schools. Maybe for some you want Active Directory to feed Google, but yeah, philosophically I think we just prefer to keep them separate, independent, unless you have some real close integration need between them. But yeah, it's a good question and good thing to think about when you're lining these up, for sure. But okay, so can you limit users sync based on grade level? Preschool students do not have Google accounts, for instance. Yes. Yeah, you can also set up rules like that, like exclude, some schools will do it by exclude the entire lower school from this. And we do, by the way, Blackbaud schools in all kinds of shapes and forms. So for example, some schools have come to us and said, when we're syncing to this platform, they're taking our lower school, middle school, upper school separately. And so, some schools using Clever, why do we have 3 different schools in Clever? We only want one school. And so we're able to transform that. And that's one of the customizations we do with the Clever Sync, for example. But yeah, we can definitely do that with like the Google Sync to be able to say exclude a specific grade levels, or exclude a whole school level, or rules like that. So yeah, you can definitely filter. Yes. All right. Well, we're right to the down to the wire here with the end. So, but if you do have any more questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. Here, my email is on the screen, eric@userbus.xyz, and my cell number is even there. So that's a direct line to me. So hopefully I have it turned off in the middle of the night if you're in a way different time zone. But no, anytime's fine. And you can also, on the website, there's a place you can schedule a Zoom meeting. And so that's obviously fine too. So, all right, hopefully we got the questions. But like I said, feel free to reach out if anything more comes up. And thanks, everybody. It was great to have everybody here. Great to have the interaction and meet some new people virtually. And yeah, like I said, reach out to me if you have any questions, and encourage you just to, if you'd like, just put in that form on the website, give us some info, and we can reach out to you if if you're interested in that. So, all right, appreciate it, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your Thursday, and for those I don't talk to for the weekend, hope you have a great great weekend as well. Thanks, everybody.